How's everybody doing? There we go. That's what I like to hear. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
It's that time of year where it's the most wonderful time of the year. How many of you would agree with that? It's the most wonderful time of the year. How many of you really want a white Christmas? I really want a white. Well, it's going to be cold anyway. I say if it's going to be cold, let's make it look pretty. Yeah. I don't want to look at all the dead trees unless they've got snow and ice like on them. That's my opinion.
My other dad
Hate snow? How can anybody hate snow? Okay, I can understand hating snow if it's been around for like weeks on end. But in Indiana, or if you're an adult, but in Indiana, it doesn't last that long. At least like this part of Indiana.
one day it's snowing, the other day it's like
Yeah, you know that if it's extreme on one end, like if it's really hot, we're gonna have a blizzard on the other, like a day later, or vice versa, because that's just how it goes, I guess. But we are counting down to Christmas, and you guys know how many days are left until Christmas? Close. 13. 13 is typically unlucky, but today we're gonna call it Lucky 13, and there is 13 days left until Christmas, which is super exciting. And you know, from TV to social media to all the streaming platforms coming out with like new Christmas holiday like content, it's easy to see why people get very excited this time of year. But for us as Christians, we're excited because it's this joyous time where we celebrate what? Jesus, the Sunday school answer, the birth of Jesus, which is obviously the reason for the season. But we all have things that we like about the holidays. For some of us, it's, you know, the presents, it's the cookies, it's a time with that extended family that you don't get to see very often. How many of you, it's like the long break from school that you get to just enjoy? How many of you, though, by the end of the 2-week break, you're like, okay, I'm ready to go back into civilization and see people again? Everyone's like, nope. Okay, fair enough. You hate your classmates, that's okay. But no, I'm just kidding. It's okay. I'm kidding. You hate the work and not the classmates. I can understand that. I can relate. So, what about the Christmas season do you look forward to every year? I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them. You got 10 seconds. Go. The thing you look forward to the most this time of year. Nice. All right. What are some of the things you guys said?
Not seeing my classmates.
Not seeing your classmates and Jesus? I'm assuming you mean not seeing your classmates, but Jesus? Okay.
Not Angie.
Okay.
Oh, really? It's just like being able to talk as much without someone else being like, you want someone without me? Or like you're hanging out with someone without me because you're at home.
So
My friends might get jealous.
the alleviation from social pressure to just kind of hang out with who you want, nobody knows because, okay, yeah, Jesus. Okay. We all say Jesus. Elf on the Shelf? Christmas lights. Seeing your family on your dad's side. Do they live far away and you only see once in a while? Yeah. Different state.
I like seeing family and presents
Family, presents, food. It's a pretty good combination right there. It's sledding. Yes. We got some epic hills in our neighborhood, so sledding is fun. We did that last year. I'll be honest, my favorite part of Christmas, yes, you got more? Any of you?
My favorite is this month I get to see my dad twice. I usually only get to see him once a month.
Well, there you go. That's exciting.
I like walking on ice and trying to see if we can see the turtles in our pond.
Okay. Just don't fall in, because that would be bad. You'd probably get hypothermia or something. Great. All right, so my favorite part of this season is the extended time with family. It's like that excuse you get to like be off of work or off of school, and you're not like getting behind on stuff? Maybe you are, but it's like it's okay to get behind on things because you're stopping everything else to just focus on the important things in life. And so I enjoy getting to spend extended time with family. I enjoy getting to see extended family. Those are probably my two favorite parts of the season. But it's the time of year when everybody tends to experience this thing called joy. You know, like the joy to the world. You guys know the song, the Christmas? Yeah. So you did, yes. So joy is what a lot of people like to say this season is really all about. And I recognize that for everybody, maybe joy isn't what they would use to describe Christmas because, you know, sometimes the holidays bring up bad things. I get that. But for a lot of people, joy is the word that they would use around Christmas time. You know, like where's your Christmas spirit, right? Like you heard that phrase before, maybe in a movie or so. But what I think a lot of us tend to do with this word is we conflate joy with another word. You know what word I'm talking about? Yeah, who said that? Happiness? Yes. We often think of joy and we think happiness as if they're the same thing. And we use those words interchangeably, except around Christmas time we use joy instead of happy. Yeah, but that's actually not the same thing. In fact, I know, spoiler alert, right? But happiness is completely different from joy. So happiness is what we feel in response to something. So, for instance, happiness, it's basically determined on outside circumstances. So if life is going great right now, then you're happy. If life is not going great right now, you're not happy. If you're getting good grades, if you have good relationships with your friends, there's no fights, there's no quarrels, you're getting what you want for Christmas under the Christmas tree, those are all circumstantial that you could say make you happy, okay? But where's the happiness when things don't go your way, when you don't get to see the family that you want to see, when you don't get that gift you want under the Christmas tree, or maybe your family can't afford gifts, and the circumstances don't seem like you should be happy? The cool thing about joy is joy exists regardless of the circumstances, whereas happiness is a little bit more circumstantial. So, but we all know somebody who can spread Christmas cheer in a way that very few people can. You guys know this person that I'm referring to? Other than Jesus. Here, I brought a clip to show you guys.
Sir, Chuck in the mailroom needs to talk to you.
It's so important you had to interrupt me. What?
So, Buddy the Elf, right? There are very few people who can spread joy like Buddy the Elf, who can go into an ordinary place like a mail room where there's like nasty fluorescent lights and everybody's just a grump and a grouch, and he goes and turns it into this hop-in like dancing party where everybody's like cheering and stuff. Like, how many of you wish you could be the kind of person that no matter what room you walk into, everybody just starts like getting super excited because you walked in, right? How many of you want to be that person? How many of you wish you had this effect on other people that you could just walk in and your presence would automatically lighten people's mood and experience joy, right? How many of you want to walk into a room and all of a sudden the mood is just killed? It's like, oh, so-and-so's here, right? Nobody wants that, right? They want to be the person that's like Buddy the Elf, that like makes every room exciting, right? So we're going to be talking about how you have this joy. In fact, in the movie, you guys have seen Elf, right? Right. If you've not seen Elf, that's your homework this Christmas season. You have to watch Elf. But one of the things that if you notice, like, it can be the worst thing in the world. Buddy can have no food except for the gum under the railing at the park, and he's still super happy, right? There can be things going on. Like, he can be trying to hug a raccoon, and the raccoon claws his face, but he's still happy, right? We all kind of wish that we could have that kind of joy no matter what's going on. like Buddy does, right? Or Jesus. But Buddy is the one that has the movie that we watch and celebrate this time of year. So it's a little more tangible sometimes. But listen. If happiness is what we feel in response to something, how would you define joy? Joy you can have, joy in Jesus you can have anytime, even if you're going through a hard time. Yes? The feeling of happiness regardless of the circumstance. Okay? Anybody else want to take a stab at it? Those are good. Here's what I'll say the official definition of joy is for today's purposes. Okay? See, joy is an attitude that we can have no matter what our circumstances are. So that's basically what you guys said. Happiness is a feeling in response to something, but joy is an attitude regardless of what's going on. Make sense, the difference there? Joy is something that, in other words, we can choose to have. You know, your parents sometimes say, you know, like, fix your attitude, right? My mom would say that to me. My dad would say that to me. Fix your attitude. Sometimes my wife says that to me, especially when I'm doing house projects and I'm short on patience, and I have to be reminded that life is something to be joyful about, right? You guys have been there. It's like when you're doing math homework and you're like, I need to fix my attitude because otherwise I will bash this pencil into my head and drive myself crazy. At least that's how I was when I was your age. But joy is an attitude that we can choose to have, regardless of what's going on in the circumstances around us. And I understand that's much easier said than done. Because when you're in a mood or when things aren't that great in life, it's really hard to choose joy. But it's also something that is not impossible, and it's something that we're going to talk about today. So if you're anything like me, and you think about joy, you almost think like there's anything, I would do anything to get joy, especially this time of year. Everybody, like, nobody wants to be unhappy. Nobody wants to be without joy in their life. It's something that everybody is chasing after. Maybe you look for joy in a really cool experience, or a really fun vacation, or in whatever you're going to get for Christmas, or whatever it is. Maybe you look for joy in the holiday lighting that we do in downtown Franklin every year. Any of you guys go to that with your families? I went to it. We were going to go to it this year. We had some sick kids, but in the previous years we've gone, and we gone one year when it was raining. And were you guys around that year? It was like December, and it was like 40 degrees and rainy, and it was terrible. But it was still a fun experience nonetheless. So whatever it is, we look for joy in all kinds of different places. Or maybe it's in an answered prayer or something along those lines. Maybe it's the way that things just work out the way that they're supposed to. Maybe it's that you get a Christmas miracle and you're able to see people that you didn't think you were going to be able to see, or whatever it is. But we're all looking for good news. We're looking for things that will bring us joy, and we're seeking it out actively in our lives. We try to control things in such a way to bring us joy. And so maybe even you look for joy in other people. How many of you, like, you hate being alone, but you like to be around people that make you feel more joyful? Right? That we like to be around people that can help us shift our attitude towards joy when maybe our circumstances don't lend that courtesy. But here's the thing. We look for joy in all kinds of things. But when we confuse joy with happiness, the thing about happiness is because it's related to circumstance, happiness will change. The happiness you have at the start of the day may not last the rest of the day. But joy is something a little bit different. So if joy is more lasting and it's not dependent on our circumstances, then the question remains, where do we find real, lasting joy? Any of you guys ever wondered that before? Where do you find real joy that's authentic, that's real, and that it lasts? And so to answer this, I want to go back to one of the most joyful times on earth, and it's a time that most people on earth missed at the time because it was so subtle. It didn't happen the way that people thought it would have happened, or it could have happened, or it should have happened. It happened in the form of a baby in a manger, right? Which is so subtle, and most people would miss it. But this was the most joyful time on earth. And it's because when Jesus was born, Jesus changed everything. Jesus changed the whole course of the way people thought about God. He changed so many things about the way we see God, the way we see his plan at work and moving in us, and he's changed the way that we can actually relate with God because Jesus bore our sin for us. And all that was set in motion when Jesus came to earth. He changed everything. And because the birth of Jesus was such a huge deal back then, some people think that the first people that would have found out about this subtle event called the birth of Jesus, the whole nativity scene, most people think that like kings would be the first to know, right? All the important people, they would be the first to know that this had happened. But no, if you know the Christmas story, who were the first people that found out about the birth of Jesus? Shout it out. Shepherds. Not the wise men, but shepherds. It's close. I know we put them all together in a nativity scene, but actually shepherds were the first ones to hear this news, even before their family. Get this, they didn't have cell phones. They could just like text a picture like, baby's here, right? So actually, shepherds were the first to know. And in fact, check this out. This is what it says in Luke chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. It says, this is when the angels appeared. They said, do not be afraid. I bring you what? Good news that will cause what? Great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. Right? So notice that they said, I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. Now, that's a pretty important phrase, right? Because I will bring good news that will cause great joy for who? For all people would mean that we are included in that, right? Because we are all people. So, in other words, this is good news that will cause great joy for everybody. For everybody who's living at that time, for everybody who's going to come after this time, this is great news. This is cause for great joy. So don't be afraid. That's what the angels say to the first people who find out that Jesus had come to the earth. And so this is pretty exciting. It's important because the shepherds were someone who especially needed to hear that message. If you know anything about that day and age and that culture, shepherds, we talk a lot about them today because they have such a key role in this story. They're the first ones to be told. But in that day and age, shepherds got no respect, right? Shepherds were not people that were like, you know what? I want to grow up and be a shepherd someday, right? Shepherds were the outcasts. Shepherds were the people that couldn't fit in with the rest of society, so they just went out and hung out with the animals. They were the people that everybody was like, oh, that's a weird smelly person, smells like animals. They should stay out in the fields and not come into town, right? Shepherds were the people like David, who his father rejected him, didn't even count him as a son, and his father was like, go out to the field, boy, shepherd the sheep. Like, shepherds were people that were looked down on and that particularly needed hope because they needed joy, because they weren't respected. They weren't given like a social standing or status in their day and age. But God has a very important message for even the shepherds. In fact, so much so that the last will be first. That they are the people that God says, I want you to have this good news before anybody else. And so the angels appear to them. How many of you, let's be honest, would wet your pants if angels appeared in your backyard in the sky and started talking to you, right? Are their voices booming? Do you feel it in your chest? Do other people see it as well, or is it just you? Do you wonder if you're hallucinating? Or do you kind of know you're not hallucinating because the three other people that were there saw it too? Or like, what do you do in that circumstance? I've always been curious. Like, if an angel just appeared in the ceiling right now, he's like, do not be afraid. You would probably pee your pants because you would be afraid, right? But these angels appear miraculously in the sky and start talking to these shepherds. And it's kind of interesting. Now, the shepherds could have thought, well, that's cool. That sounds like something that might make us happy, right? They could have gone right back to their lives and moved on. But instead, what did they do? Do you guys know the story? What did the shepherds do after the angels appeared to them? They went to Jesus. So not only did the angels say, hey, I have great news that will cause great joy for all of you, they did just go, oh, great, thanks. Oh, I feel better now. Thanks. Right, and back to shepherding. They sought out where to find the joy. Because the angels brought the good news, and then the shepherds had to go and find the great joy. So they go to baby Jesus in a manger. They go and see the Messiah, the Lord, the ones that the angels had talked about. And that's exactly what we can do too. Many of you, I recognize that Christmas is not always the best time of year for you. Maybe you put on a face and you smile and you fake it because it's like this feeling that everybody has, so you kind of get it in that sense, but everything in your personal life maybe doesn't point to a very joyous occasion this time of year. Maybe it's the time of year where all your family argues because they're all in the same room together that one day a year. Maybe it's that time of year that you're reminded that someone is not there that should be there. And maybe it's that time of year where you just honestly don't want to deal with the hustle and bustle. I recognize for a lot of you, joy may not be the first thing that you think about when you think about Christmas. But we have a message that is still true today, 2,000 years ago, that there is great news that is cause for great joy. And part of receiving that joy is that we have to go and seek it out. We have to choose an attitude of joy. It doesn't just happen because it's more than a feeling. It's a sense of peace. Like we talked about last week. We get this because of something that's much longer lasting than our circumstances. And if you've experienced hard things in life, chances are you're going to experience it again later. So it's a good idea now to learn how to seek joy, to find joy. That's why the phrase "find joy in everything," it's because you have to actually find it. You have to adjust your attitude towards it and posture yourself towards joy rather than becoming a negative Nancy and just like giving into all the negatives that are around life. Because you don't have to look very far to find those. You don't have to search and find unhappiness. That's around every corner. But you have to search and find joy. But the good news is that because of Jesus, there is always joy. Because of Jesus, there's always joy. You can always find joy in life because of Jesus. Because regardless of anything else that's going on in your life, you have hope and you have a peace that is far outlasting any of those things. And you know that this is not our home. Right? This earth, this is not forever. You and I, spoiler alert, we die at some point. But that's not the end of our story. Because of Jesus. This is like the prequel to the real story, which is after we die and we get to spend eternity with God. That's the joy. And we're not promised like rainbows and butterflies in this life, although they do exist. We're not promised that. We are promised, though, that we can have joy because of Jesus. We are promised that it will all work out in the end. In the end, we're going to have victory. That makes us victorious even now. And so, no matter what's going on in our lives, this Christmas season, I want you to remember that there is always cause for joy, no matter what's going on. And that's because of Jesus. Now, again, this is easier said than done, but just to prove the point even more, Jesus, who is the person that joy is all about, right? That we've been talking about this whole time. Jesus, who you think would have every reason to have more joy than anybody else because he was the Son of God, right? Did he have an easy life? Do you guys know? He didn't really have a home because he did ministry and traveled around and stayed with other people and they camped a lot. Like, he was kind of a drifter during his life on earth, during his ministry. We know that his dad died at a young age because in Luke, we see that Joseph is around when he's about 12, but then we don't ever hear about Joseph again. So he knows what that's like. He knows what it's like to have friends turn their backs on him. He knows what it's like to, in your hour of need people, and they abandon you. He knows deep hurt. And he knows pain and suffering because his whole purpose for coming here was to endure that because of our sin so that things can be right with us and him in the end. And Jesus chose joy. The whole reason for joy is because of Jesus. And he was okay with, life on earth may not always be great. In fact, the writer of Hebrews talks about it this way. He says, for the joy set before him, talking about Jesus, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So he did all those things for what? For the joy set before him. In other words, to solidify that joy into something that is beyond circumstantial, I've got to pay this price for it. So for the joy set before him, he endured that cross for our sake. And this is the person that we worship. This is the God that we serve. This is the Savior. Not only of the world, but for our lives today if we choose him. And he's the reason that we can have joy. He's the reason that this season is so worth celebrating and why we're so excited to count down the days until Christmas. Because of Jesus, there's always joy. And this joy comes, part of finding this joy and seeking it out, it comes from having a relationship with Jesus. So if you don't have that, I'd love for you to talk with your small group leader about that today. But knowing Jesus is what changes everything. He's the one who gives us that lasting joy. He's the one that can supersede all other circumstances because we know the end of the story. Knowing Jesus changes everything. So if you want to know how to better apply this in your life so that you can find joy, so that you can remember joy even when life seems to point you in every other direction, first off, I want you to remember that God will use everything for good even if the situation isn't. Now, I always have to throw the disclaimer, that does not mean God causes bad things to happen to force you to turn to him. What that is saying is that regardless of what happens, God promises to walk with us in the storm. He promises to be with us and that we are not alone. And he promises that no matter what we're going through, he can use it for something good if you let him. Sometimes he'll even do it without your permission. But I know when you're going through a hard time, it's hard to see how God will use that situation for good. And I've been there. But he does. Sometimes we get to see that play out. Sometimes we don't this side of heaven. But God will use every situation for good because he has our best interests in mind. His promises are good, they are true, and he loves you. So remember that everything will work out for good even if the situation isn't good. Secondly, remember that God promises to make everything right in the end. Oftentimes, we miss the forest for the tree. In other words, we focus in on what's right in front of us and we miss everything else that's going on. And it's really easy to do, especially at your age. When you see the stuff going on in your life, it's hard to even think about next week because you're worrying about all the other things that you've got going on this week. And I get that, right? Everybody gets caught up in that. But if we don't take time and intentionally step back and look to see the big picture, that our time on earth is a blip in contrast with eternity, right? We know that it's going to work out in the end and that God's going to use it for good. So remember that his promises are good and that he will make it right in the end. We can have joy because of that. And the third thing is to remember to look for joy. It's not something that'll just happen at the snap of a finger because it's not circumstantial. You have to look at it. You have to seek it out. You have to find it. Maybe that means you got to go spend time with God. Get to know him more. Spend time in his word. Pursue him. Maybe it's taking time to pray when you need a little more joy in your life. Say, God, I'm mad at you. I don't really know what to do with what's going on right now, but I'm asking you to help me find a little bit of joy in the midst of this. I'm asking you to be with me. And maybe that means you got to pray that. Maybe it's spending more time with the people that you love who also believe in Jesus, because that encourages us. It helps us know we're not alone. Maybe it's reading more about Jesus in places like Luke, like we've read from today. But wherever it is, commit to looking for joy. And I promise it will change your outlook on everything. Because of Jesus, there is always joy. And so as we wrap up our time, I want to just give you a little sneak peek. Next week, speaking of joy, we are going to have some Christmas party, which is going to be fun. So I hope you come back. I hope you're here next week. We're going to play lots of fun games. We're going to give away prizes. There will be candy for everybody, even if you don't win the game. You just don't get bragging rights. But it's going to be a fun time, so I hope you come. We do have a Saturday night service, and we also have our normal 9 and 10:30 services. So we will be here every time the church doors are open next weekend, and I hope you come. We're going to have a great time. So as you get ready to go to your small groups, think about this question. What's one thing that has brought you joy this year? What's one thing that has brought joy to your life this year? Think about that question. I'm going to pray for you, and you guys can be dismissed to your small groups.